Welcome everybody. We're going back into our study through the Bible chronologically. And I thought to myself, we have covered a whole lot of ground. And so why not have a quick recap? So just to start this recap, it's when are we? When in the Earth's history are we? And we are 1,656 years in. This is the start of Genesis 9. We can see that by adding up the times in Noah's lives, adding up the times of the genealogies before him, we get a very clear picture of how long the Earth has existed for. So we're at year 1,656. A lot of distance. Thousands of years have been traveled in just 9 chapters. Pretty remarkable. And who is alive at this point, right? Who are the characters that we should know? What is existing in this world at the moment? And well, I think terrestrial species are quite low. The species that are going to be walking over the land, crawling on the earth, as it says in the previous chapters, 2 of each running around, starting to multiply. Maybe if they're rabbits, there's a lot more. But otherwise, we've got a low number of creatures on the earth. And at the time of this chapter, only 8 people. Within 2 years, we would have a 9th person. But let's quickly just hit a quick recap of the chapters and the main principle that I feel like comes from these chapters. Genesis 1, God creates everything. God is the creator. There is a God. He has created everything. Get that in your head. Genesis 2, more detail about God creating man and woman. Man and woman. God created them both. He put them in a garden. This is Genesis 2. Genesis 3, man falls, man sins, and man leaves the garden. Genesis, the genealogies. So also in Genesis 4, we get a taste and a little picture of the technology and how people advanced at the time. And then in Genesis 5, we go through genealogy. I think that's my shortest video so far. So if you only have a short time, check that one out. Genesis 6, the growing wickedness of man and God's plan to flood the earth. Genesis 7, the flood, the end of the world. Genesis 8, the end of the flood and bringing in the new world. And now we are in Genesis 9. And I just want to also go over a few principles that we've learned about God, right? That's the purpose of the study. We want to learn about the Creator. God can only be of infinite importance or of no importance. One thing he cannot be is of medium importance. So he can only be somebody that is a fiction of a creation of our imagination, which he is not. He is very much alive. Or he is the creator of the universe who holds all power. And that makes him the most important being in the universe, the most important person to get to know in the history of ever. So, the principles we have learned about God so far. He is a creator. He likes to create things, evidenced by the fact that he created everything. God makes things beautiful, evidenced by the fact of, look at the world. That's what God made, right? That is something he has created. Look at people. Look at how beautiful people are. Look at how beautiful animals are. Look at how beautiful the sunset is. That's God's creation. He makes things beautiful. God seeks out our good. I take it from Genesis 2, I think it is, where God tells him, listen, just don't eat of that tree, the tree of the knowledge of the good and evil. That is for our good. That was for Adam's good, because if he ate of it, he would surely die spiritually, and he did. So God seeks out our best interest, and he is out to give us the best. Moving on, God is just and he is willing to punish. We can see that shown in the story of Cain and Abel. We can see that shown with Adam and Eve. We can see that shown on the nations of the earth and Noah and his family. We've already seen 3 major accounts of God being willing to punish and issue curses on the earth. And that is quite a remarkable thing about an all-powerful being. If an all-powerful being was unwilling to punish, I think it would be a world that you could breathe a bit easier in. But in this world, in this creation, in reality, God is a God who is willing to punish the wicked. And the next point, and I guess that's a sub-point, is that God will punish every wicked person. It's not the case where he will skip over some because he kind of likes how they are evil or how they are wicked. That's not the case with God. God punishes the multitude. When the multitude sin, God punishes the multitude, but he will save the righteous. We see that from the story of Noah. He's a God who cares for people on an individual basis. He was willing to go through the whole earth and find the one righteous man, right? That is God's heart. He is willing to search through every single man's heart on this planet. He's willing to look into your heart, and he's willing to care for you on an individual and personal basis. He's willing to save you on a personal basis. And now it's not through an ark, but it's through Jesus Christ. God will not let sin in his provision of perfection, right? God's perfection, where God makes something perfect, sin is not allowed to be inside there. And we see that in the Garden of Eden. Adam and Eve sin, they kicked out. God says, we're not having this in my garden. And they're gone. He will warn people before calamity takes place. God is not a God who just lashes out of nowhere. He's not somebody who just smacks you. I don't know. I look at my cats and they'll be doing something wrong and I'll discipline them because they need to be disciplined. Give them a little flick or a little tap and they freak out. They're like, what the heck? I had no warning. Yet I've said to them multiple times before, no, don't, no, right? God is a God who gives a warning. It is really clear and obvious. His warning is so that none would perish, because it is not his will that any should perish, but all should have everlasting life. We see that in John 3. God saves those who are righteous and who are willing to submit to him. He's willing to show himself strong for them. We see that in the flood. He wants to have a relationship with people. Why does God take all this time to interact with us? He walked in the cool of the day with Noah. With Adam. He spoke to Cain. He spoke to Cain to warn him about sin, and then he gives him a judgment. Makes him wonder in the hopes that Cain would come back to a relationship with God, but never did. This is the God we serve, and God is a God who moves when his people need him. He's not a God that sits in the background. He's not a God that'll just let us perish for no reason. He's a God that moves when we are in need. It's not to say that he saves everybody and he saves every Christian, because the Psalms say that precious in the sight of the Lord are the dying of his saints. But God shows himself strong for us. He is our provider, right? And he will move when we are in need. We are his children. We're not just objects that he doesn't care about, but we are his children. And just think about when your children are in need. If you have children, how you would be so willing to move on their behalf. God is just as willing. He's just as willing to move and to show himself strong on your behalf. But when God moves, he shows himself strong on your behalf for an eternal good and not just right here, right now.